Hi, everybody. We're good to go. Welcome to our webinar. I'm Venkatesh, co-founder of GrowCurve.com. We're a marketplace for marketing services. Many of you have been with us before on previous webinars. We're basically putting forward a point of view that the world is changing, digitization is taking over, and these sessions are really about how to bring marketing into digital services, how to bring digital services to market you better. Today, I have the privilege of introducing Manisha Lal Gupta, one of the finest marketers of our generation. Manisha has experience of both over 20 years and across several sectors. That's what makes her unique. That's what makes her perspectives very, very relevant and unique. Fintech, FMCG, e-commerce, technology. She's seen all of these worlds very closely, and I'm very happy that she's here to talk to us about how technology company services can use marketing principles better, what's been her experience, and how she would recommend things to marketers in technology services. Manisha, over to you. Thank you very much for joining us today. Have fun.
Thank you, Venki, and hello, everybody. Really happy to be here. I know it's a post-lunch session, 2 p.m., and it might be that too on a Friday, so some of you might be kind of sleepy, but I'm going to try to make this as interesting as I can. To start with, let me just introduce myself a little bit further and also give you a sense of what to expect from this webinar and what not to expect. As Venkatesh said, I've been working for a long time now, 23 years. Venkatesh and I, in fact, happen to be batchmates from IIM Bangalore. And my experience really pans across FMCG, where I worked with Unilever and Colgate-Palmolive. A lot of that experience has been in new product development and innovation. I've then transitioned to banking, where I used to be the chief marketing officer at Axis Bank, and I managed to also sort of reinvent myself and take on a lot of digital roles there. And finally, I was leading the electronic banking group. And I've then worked in fintech. Clicks Capital was one of the companies that I've worked with. And more recently, I used to work in consumer tech with Uber. On the side, I've also been an entrepreneur. I've run my own startup called Indian Art Collectors, something that I founded in 2005, and then sold it off to NDTV in 2016, and it now goes by the name of Mojato. It's a e-commerce marketplace for art. And I'm also a permaculturist, which is basically one way of farming and another way of living, which is more permanent and is a very relevant lifestyle to adopt in these times of COVID. So those are my areas of interest and passion. And what I'm going to share with you today is stuff that I've picked up along the way, things which I think might help you as you run your own businesses, as you run your own teams and marketing functions. What you should expect from this chat is some concepts, some ideas, some ways of working. What you should not expect is a fancy PPT or a useful slides that you can sort of take away from here. So the slides are fairly basic, and what I'm going to focus on is really the content and the substance. And I'm going to give you some examples from my own experience on when some of these things have come in handy. As Venkatesh has said, we are happy to take in questions. So please keep sending your questions to him along with your email ID, and we will answer all questions at the end of the session. If you feel I'm going too fast, please drop in a mail again into the chat box, and we can sort of slow down there. All right, so if you're good to go, let me start my share screen and start up my presentation. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little today about building brands for tech products and services. And, you know, having seen the FMCG sector where marketing is really core to the business, and a marketing function is what runs the business. The CEO of a FMCG company would always be a marketing person. It's quite different when it comes to banks, and again, quite different when it comes to tech products and services. But what I want to sort of, talk about here is that what should be the ideal role of marketing in these companies, and why we must reclaim our place within these organizations and play a much more prominent and dominant role than what we do currently. So for starters, I'm just going to sort of go through again that what is marketing, because a lot of times marketing gets mistaken as some very trivial stuff, like, we need a canopy, so marketing team will make it. We need some posters to wo chhap ke de denge. Something extremely sort of tactical. Whereas marketing is actually the act of creating demand for our products and services. And if you define marketing like that, you'll realize marketing is about running the business, because if you do not have demand for your products and services, I mean, you have no revenue really. And if you don't have any revenue, you don't have any business. So how do we really find a place for ourselves within these tech companies to play a much more relevant role, and how do we bring marketing within many more dimensions and areas of functional areas, is something that I want to touch upon today. Again, marketing gets mistaken many times as promotions, trade incentives, discounts, offers. Like, I've heard this many times saying, "Ki nahi, humne to we did such a fantastic job of marketing. We two people stood in the marketplace with flyers and onboarded merchants, or we stood at a parking lot and recruited drivers." Those things are not marketing. Those things are more promotional kind of pushes. Or I would also call them maybe trade discounts or incentives or promotions. But marketing is really when you can build top of mind call, when there is a pull from somebody to come and actually interact with your brand. So the kind of things you would measure from a marketing output point of view is top of mind recall. Do people remember your brand? Do they think of you when they need that product or service? Is this a brand for me? In a market where there are so many people, so many brands competing, does your brand come across as a brand that the consumer feels, "Ki, haan, yaar, this is right for me"? How do we win hearts and minds? Remember, brands are like friends, right? And people want to hang out with friends that they like. So how do we win more hearts and minds? How does the brand become more insightful? And how does the brand stand up and fulfill unmet and sometimes even unstated needs? So these are the kind of expectations one should have from a marketing program, that we should be able to build a pull for the brand rather than it being seen as a very tactical, push-driven function where you are just sort of doing things from time to time to get that little bit of push for your product or your service. So over time, a strong brand actually helps to reduce the cost of generating demand. And that's why it's important, because in a tech company, a lot of times people say, if I do this, how do I measure it? Right? I know how to measure performance marketing spends, but I do not know how to measure advertising spends. But the truth is that as you build a stronger brand, you start getting more organic signups, or even if you're still running performance campaigns, your cost of acquisition reduces because your brand is so strong that you attract people at a lower cost. So it's complicated to measure it. It's not that simplistic, but it can be done. And it's important for us to know that a strong brand will actually see you through for a long time. And we'll talk about some examples as we get through this presentation. So how does a tech company really start off? It starts off with somebody having a product idea. We make a product like this. It will be a digital kind of a tech service, and somebody is going to consume it and use it in a particular way. What sometimes doesn't happen is really how do you develop a proposition? And that's really the first place where marketing comes in. Some of this can be product marketing, some of it can be brand marketing. But the fact is that for whatever service or product you have, you must be able to convert that into a proposition, because consumers respond to propositions. They don't respond to product ideas. And what do I mean by a proposition? A proposition is something where your product idea and its specific features, service, experience, mission, vision, whatever you may call it, actually interacts with, delivers on a consumer need or a consumer habit, perception, attitude, barrier, trigger, emotion, feeling. So there's a little bit of an overlap there. There is something that a consumer wants, and sorry, I just got distracted by one of the chat boxes. Sorry, back here. So how do we identify what the consumer wants, their needs, their habits, their perception, attitude, and what is it that you are actually delivering to the consumer? And then the third context is really cultural. Like, what is the cultural context? For us during COVID, the cultural context has suddenly changed quite dramatically. But your brand, product, and the consumer might have remained the same, or maybe some of your consumers' needs or habits might be changing now, given that the cultural context has changed. So you have to look at these three elements to really see where you overlap and how you deliver your product idea as a proposition. And by way of example, I've just put pictures from two campaigns that we run at Uber. One is for Uber Auto and the other is for Uber Moto. You know, Uber is a service which takes you from one place to the other, but there are multiple ways of getting to those places. You can either go in a car, you can go in an auto rickshaw, or you go by bike. So how do you now start differentiating these three modes of transport? And how do you create a different proposition for each one of them? Because you're targeting a different TG. So very interestingly, when we started doing the consumer work, we realized that from a consumer perspective, auto was mostly taken by women, and there was a higher affinity for women with auto as a vehicle, whereas men were probably more used to going on a bike, or were even okay to share or hitch a ride with somebody on a motorcycle. So we decided to position these two very specifically for women on one side, and early jobbers or young youth who are going for their first job or something like that for the motor customer. And the second big insight that we found, especially for women, was that, you know, people are constantly paranoid, family members, friends, as to whether the person is going to be safe or not during the commute. So that was really a deep cultural context, that even if a woman comes back with a great job or comes back with some sort of a success story, usually the first reaction of people is, "वो तो ठीक है, but how are you going to get there? How are you going to find your way to that place? तुम जाओगी कैसे? आओगी कैसे?" And that's really what reflected in the advertising. And this is an example of how you convert a product idea into a proposition. Now, suddenly, if you see that ad, I mean, you know, I'm way beyond the age group that we showed in that ad, but even I could sort of identify with it and say, yes, this is my story. This is what happens to me when I'm going out somewhere. People are constantly asking, have you reached? When will you return? How will you come back? So how do you convert your tech product or service into a proposition is really a key thing. And then also see the cultural context. And very important for us to understand is that a lot of times the tech product or service is actually a very small part of the consumer journey, right? A lot of the consumer experience is happening in the physical world. And therefore, the overall experience is what I call a phygital experience. Part of it is in the physical world and some of it is in the digital world. And as the tech product service provider, you have to sort of take accountability for both. So while the product is made by the tech team or the product development team and focuses more on efficiency, reliability, functionality, UX, UI, the service end of it is what's managed by the ops team, and marketing plays a role there as well from a customer experience point of view, and focuses on assortment or delivery or ops, physical experience, actual service, customer credo. So there are two legs to it, and very often companies and even potential employees get confused about what kind of a company they're working in. They think they're working in a tech company, but they're actually working in an ops company. And so therefore you need slightly different skill set to be able to work in companies like that. So there is product and brand marketing both. Product marketing is what's really focused on the product. Like, for example, the example that I gave you about Auto and Moto, the app itself is the product, which is standardized, and the functionality is very much the same whether you take a car or an auto or a moto, but the experience or the service is different if you're taking an auto or a moto or a car, and that really comes under the service leg. So this whole phygital world that comes into play is something that I think each one of us should be very cognizant and aware of, because that's how the customer experiences you. In an Uber journey, for example, you might be just interacting with the app for 5% of the time that you are actually experiencing Uber. The rest of the time is spent in the vehicle, waiting for the vehicle, interacting with the driver, many things which are actually beyond the physical product app. So that's a thought that I thought I'd sort of leave you with, and you should keep that in mind as you work through your marketing. Let's take a look at the sort of the cycle of how we engage customers, and then what exactly happens. And I'll deep dive a little bit into all these 6 boxes and speak a little bit more in detail. But there's awareness, then there's often education, and that's what's very different from FMCG, that a lot of the tech products need a lot of education around them. There's trial, then there's engagement, then there's adoption, and finally there's advocacy. Some could argue that adoption and engagement could sort of flip around, but I think you have to engage customers enough to get them to adopt it. And adopt, I mean, really, you should be the preferred sort of app or preferred experience for the consumer. So let's talk about each one of these and say, how do you build awareness for your brand? So you can build awareness, in a bunch of ways. The first is advertising. And advertising today is far cheaper than what it used to be in yesteryears. You could produce something very good quality yet very affordable, and then you have digital channels to actually air it on. So you can do very localized advertising. You don't need to rely on television. You don't need a lot of the other high big budget expenses that traditionally are there in advertising. You can also do a lot of storytelling, like you could make short films, but they have to be engaging and share worthy. And of course, they can't be viral. They will be viral if they want to be, but you can't decide that they're going to be viral films. But what I've seen is that if you solve real problems, really tell human stories which are relevant, which have purpose, and they're solving real problems, they do tend to get some traction of their own and end up getting a lot of sort of sharing amongst the relevant target community. Performance marketing is, of course, one of the most common ways that people try to build the brand to start with. And I think the only point I would touch upon here is that the creative is as important as the efficiency. More often than not, I've seen a lot of focus on efficiency, the kind of talent that performance marketers attract, and the kind of things that performance marketers um, are proud of, or they feel that this is their strength, is more quantitative, more analytical. But at the end of it, what gives you a better ROI or a lower cost per click is actually how good the creative is. So focusing on creative, and I'll just draw an example here. For example, at Uber, one would always advertise the main app to do acquisition, and a lot of that creatives would be around cars, because traditionally that's what Uber is, and globally that's what Uber is. And some of the performance campaigns might have creatives which are global in nature. But in India, there's only a limited car audience, and beyond that, perhaps to acquire the next customer using an auto rickshaw creative might be far more impactful and far cheaper to acquire that customer than using a car creative. So it's just a little bit of an example of how you should look at the creatives pretty closely when you're running performance campaigns, and not dismiss that as something which is more, sort of creative and arty, and wo brand marketing wale log karte hain, and hum to we are the efficiency people. So I think that's something that you should be able to differentiate and be cognizant of. And finally, of course, you can do PR. It's good to do some PR if somebody is willing to do that for you, in the sense if media is willing to talk to you. But do have a more credible, empathetic spokesperson so that you can humanize the brand. Remember, tech brands always suffer from a certain amount of lack of humanness and robotic kind of a sense to them. Okay, is there anybody beyond this app? Will somebody solve my problem? Will somebody pick up my phone? Can I reach out to somebody? So I think it's important for marketers to also focus on humanizing the brand, so that people do feel reassured, especially in a country like India. So as a next step, really is education. I think this is something that many companies do not give enough importance to, or even think about it too much. But how does your product or service work? It's very important to have enough information around that in the public domain, like the how-to videos, troubleshooting, self-help, onboarding. And I'll give you an example here. When I used to run internet banking and mobile banking at Axis Bank, initially we used to have a team of customer support people, because we were just helping people with their passwords, with onboarding, with sort of downloading the app and installing it on their phone and things like that. And when we revamped some of these platforms, we were very clear that we want zero support. We don't want any customer support for these platforms, because there's no point in building a digital platform and then putting support behind it. So we really flooded the website and the YouTube channel with a lot of how-to videos, and got people to learn for themselves on how to reset their password, how to do something or the other. That worked very well for us, and we could actually disband the dedicated team that we had from customer support. So this is a very essential part of product marketing, and whoever is doing that must make sure that there's enough education around that, especially when your tech product or service is something which is quite disruptive and new in the ecosystem. Then comes trial. So how do you get people to actually try your product? I think the first thing is to really be able to define your target audience very sharply so that you know who you're going after. Uh, we sometimes tend to just get excited by numbers, and as long as people are recruiting, coming into the fold, we are happy. But it's important for us to also get the TG right, because then they are more likely to be sticky and last, and the cost of their lifetime value is going to be cheaper. So I think that's important. And therefore, affinity groups and partnerships is a great way to also target them. If you know that these guys, the people who like football, are also bikers, it's just much easier to figure out where to catch them. It's good to create trial at the moment of truth. So if you can understand what triggers and barriers really work for people. For example, a ride sharing company will probably benefit more from a trial at the airport where people are struggling anyways to find a cab to take them home or from a railway station than they are at let's say at a hotel where a lot of people are coming in sort of driver driven cars, or the valet is bringing their cars. So how do you really identify the moment of truth and give them a nudge at that point? And then, of course, promotions and discounts have really been the most sort of preferred way of getting trial. And I think it's important to understand that discounts can erode the brand. So just give that much of a discount as you can without really stripping your brand of any value. Even in recent history, you'll remember many startups which have come and gone because they gave a lot of discounts. They had a huge customer base, but they had no brand affinity, and so people didn't even miss them when they left. And that's it's important to always remember that. Engagement. I think in terms of engagement, gamification is a great way to build engagement. And we've done something interesting at Uber around the Cricket World Cup, which we were sponsoring last year, where the number of trips you took, you could earn runs, and then those runs sort of totaled up and gave you a free ticket to see a match in the UK. So simple things like that can actually help build gamification and get people to be engaged with your platform. Even social media in terms of stories, human impact stories, or solving real problems, or sometimes even things like polls, opinion polls, getting people's feedback. Those are interesting things. Or co-creating a product or a service with your TG. I think that's also interesting. And of course, nudges and helpers like bots are quite useful in your products and services, because they give you the right nudge. It sort of looks like it's a human experience, but it may not be. But that's an interesting way of building engagement as well. So what we've talked about till now is really how do you build awareness, how do you get trial, and how to get engagement. So this is all cost of acquisition. And there is a tendency amongst tech products and service companies to be very focused on acquisition, because we are trying to show numbers to investors that we have X number of people or Y number of people on our platform. But what's really the most important leg of the customer lifecycle journey is the adoption phase, because that's really where you're already sitting on a large set of customers. And now how do you manage to get them to use more of your product, get them to pay more, get them to be more sticky, etc. That's really the crux. And I find that often CRM is not run as well as the acquisition machine is, because we are very focused on acquisition. CRM or customer lifecycle management is seen a little bit of a black box. It's built sometimes very scrappily, and there's no structure or strategy to it. So it's important to look back and say, okay, we've acquired a certain number of customers. Now, how do we build the lifecycle machinery in a way that we are maximizing their revenue potential? Because the cost of acquiring is only going to go up, right? As you reach saturation, it's only going to go. So that's one. And the second thing is really the customer experience. A lot of you've got this customer, you don't want to lose this customer at any cost. So how do you build a customer experience, a customer service credo, or their experience at physical touch points? And this is something that I'd learned at the bank, that no matter what you do, what advertising you do, what things you build, at the end of it, if the customer has a poor experience when they walk into a branch, you're going to lose them. So how do you train your staff to have a better experience? How do you create a physical touchpoint experience, which is great? How do you make your ATMs look nice and clean and keep them clean all the time? How do you improve your branch layout so that people are not feeling like they are entering a branch which is really crowded or it has a lot of queues everywhere? So marketing team had actually undertaken huge redesign activities of the branch had put together a customer service credo to train the branch staff on how to deal with customers in a standardized, branded manner. And a lot of effort was put into the physical touch points. And I think that's equally relevant, let's say, for an Uber, where we had redesigned the airport experience to make sure that airports itself have a much better experience of onboarding, of taking an Uber and going somewhere. So here the product is not that important, but it's the customer experience, because otherwise people are just going to say, this is just too cumbersome. I cannot wait here for my anymore. So I think those are some of the things that one has to look at. And then comes the customer life cycle, or the CRM experience, where I think I learned this from somebody who was actually the founder of Unica. And he said that, you have to run your CRM program in a way that your sales effort should look like a service to the customer. And that's always stuck with me. So how do you identify events and triggers? How do you identify the right time to send the message? The customer should say, "Arey, inko kaise pata chala that I wanted this or I needed this?" That's really the beauty of a well-designed, very strategic life cycle, because you don't want to over-communicate and you don't want to overuse or misuse this channel. So you have to craft the content and creative in a way that the timing is relevant and it's timely, and people actually feel, this message has come to me just at the right time. So a couple of examples of this would be, for example, in a bank, if you know that a large credit has come into somebody's account, that's the time to send them a message around investments. Not any other time, not when the poor chap has 500 rupees in his account, right? So simple things like that. And because you're sitting on customer data, how do you mine it and really make the most of it? In a ride sharing kind of a situation, it would be that, okay, if somebody's taken a trip to the airport, clearly they are going somewhere, and therefore they might need an Uber at the other end of it as well. So things like that. Think about your CRM and your customer experience. Very, very important, other than just doing mail blasts, which anyways nobody reads anymore. And linked to that is your upsell and cross-sell strategy. And how do you premiumize people? How do you take somebody up from having a prime savings account to a priority saving account to a wealth account? And how do you really keep premiumizing? Or how do you take somebody from auto rickshaw or motorcycle to an auto rickshaw to a Uber Go to an Uber Premier? That's an important part of marketing as well. And finally, you can, of course, if you're large enough and you're willing to put that kind of money, cut out the money from promotions and put it all into loyalty and rewards. And here, the few things to look out for is, what's your earn rate looking like and what's your burn rate looking like? Because the loyalty program has to be attractive enough for people to not feel that it'll take me a lifetime to get anything. And it should not look like when I go to redeem something, it costs me 10,000 points to actually get a 500 rupee Tupperware box. So the earn rate, burn rate is important, and how people earn and how they burn is important. And I won't get into more details, but for those of you who are interested, you should read up a little bit more about that. So I think this is really the heart of tech and tech products and services. Like, how do you manage your customers and manage to really extract the maximum lifetime value from them? Next is basically advocacy. And, you have to identify the right time to build advocacy. The brand has to be established. Influencers should look genuine. You should be able to sort of weave lifelike stories which are convincing and people believe you. And you could also build a community for your brand. It's especially relevant on supply side. For example, if you're running a ride sharing business and you need drivers, it's a great way to get drivers is by building the community. You can get referrals in that way. Similarly, I used to run an art e-commerce marketplace, and a way for me to get more artists to join the platform was to create a community and get one artist to refer another artist. But in a niche interest area, even on the demand side of things, you could build communities. Like art collectors themselves are a good community, or a motorcycle enthusiast, or anything which are golfers, for example, or sailors. Like anything which is niche, you can build a community around it to build a certain sense of advocacy. So that's really, I think, the 6 points that I feel go into building a marketing plan for a tech services and tech product companies. And if you see the analogy between the 4 Ps of marketing and how they were used in FMCG or how they are used here, you'll see there actually a lot of similarity, except that in tech companies, a lot of those roles have been taken over by other people. So, for example, the product is not designed with marketing teams at all. In fact, the product team and the engineering teams are pretty much sort of, have carved a little role for themselves. And, marketing has been sort of kept out of it. Similarly, on pricing, business and revenue teams are the ones who take on this job. And, in terms of distribution or place, it's a lot to do with the operations teams. So it's only the promotion, which in this context is really marketing, that still stays with the marketing teams. And I do believe that marketing teams have an important role to play in product, price, and place as well. But they have to make themselves relevant. And, one of the ways that you can do that is to give feedback on the customer experience, the key processes and journeys that are there in the product, because that's what you pick up when you go and do consumer insighting and, work with consumers. So just for example, onboarding, downloading a new app and, onboarding on it is such an important process. And, if you can't get that onboarding process right from a product perspective, no matter how much acquisition money you put in or how great your creative or your advertising is, if your onboarding process is broken or illogical, or not seamless, you're just going to lose those customers. So it's important that marketing has a say in the product development perspective. And similarly on price, there's so much choice modeling and price sensitivity studies that can go in from a research and insights perspective to understand what's the right price, what are the trade-offs, can you premiumize, how much more is somebody willing to pay? And I feel like some of these conversations, which are very much marketing conversations, are not done with marketing folks for whatever reason within tech companies. And similarly on distribution as well, how do you come across at that place is a very important part of distribution. So how do you look at the airport if you're an Uber, or how do you look as a how do you look as a branch or an ATM if you're a bank? These are very important things because a lot of trust gets built at that point. So it's important for marketing to have a perspective there and not just leave that to the ops teams. And so I would finish by saying that, if it's marketing is an act of creating demand for products and services, then actually marketers need to reclaim their role within tech organizations and play a much bigger role and really earn their place and their stature within tech organizations.
Great. Manisha, thanks immensely for your time. Great session, lovely insights. We'll be sending out this recording to the participants as well. But thank you hugely for being with us this afternoon. A big thanks also to all the participants who've been here. We'll come back to you again next Friday. Thanks for being with us. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you, Venkat, for having me. Bye-bye.